Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Politics Social with me, Harris, and I'm also joined by the wonderful Chay Brown. I must apologize for our very late start this evening. It was all Graham's fault, who was caught by the football and the traffic in Liverpool getting away from the Labour conference this evening. So won't be many of you on, but I hope there are some of you with us, and welcome. So I am very happy and very honored to be joined by the wonderful Chay Brown, who I would love you to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about who you are.
Hiya, I'm Chay Brown. My pronouns are he and him, and I'm co-founder, director of operations, and director for healthcare at TransActual. And TransActual is a national trans-led and run organisation with a very simple ask, Rachel. We're just asking for a UK and indeed a world where trans people can live safely, in dignity, and with appropriate access to healthcare. And we're startlingly far away from achieving that at the moment.
That's very true. I also love that I've been watching a lot of your output, and I really want people to go and look up TransActual and donate to them, which you can do on their website. Is the Talking to Your MP campaign.
Yes.
Tell us a little
Yes.
bit about that, because it's at two levels, isn't it? There's young people and elderly people like me. I really love that. Tell the viewers a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, Meet Us Heroes is I mean, it's very much does what it says on the tin sort of campaign. What we're trying to do is encourage trans people to meet with their MPs or other elected representatives, whether it's the local councillors, whether it's their Senate member or member of the Northern Irish Assembly, or indeed MSP. In with the now agenda coming to it beyond just giving these elected representatives the opportunity to hear from a trans person and cut through all the nonsense, basically cut through all the misinformation, all the stuff on social media, all the so-called culture wars, and actually talk to trans people, because these people are making decisions about our lives,
Yeah.
and that's why it's really important they meet us and hear us. So yeah, we're going to be heading down to Westminster, or up to Westminster, depending on where people are coming from, on the 13th of November, which is the first day of Trans Awareness Week,
Yeah.
to meet with MPs. But really, whenever people meet their elected representative, that's the main thing, and we've got lots of resources and
Yes.
a workshop program for people to access, to get that little bit more information and that little bit of support to just be empowered to take that step and go and have that meeting.
Yeah. It's an amazing idea. I like the young people meeting MPs and the adults section, and I really like the fact is that because we know that the anti-trans movement has campaigners in Parliament fairly full time, and they don't see any trans faces down there. So I love the fact that people can just go and see. You've got guidance of what to say, how to say it, and how to meet it, and I just think that's an amazing idea. Have you had a high take up?
So far we've got people signing up for the workshops.
Yeah, good.
Sort of a steady take up. There's
Mm.
plenty of space on them, so people
Yeah,
can still sign up. And there's a session specifically for Black trans people and trans people of color, to sort of have that hold that space as well, because there might be conversations that people would feel more comfortable having in a BPOC specific
yeah,
space as well. So I'd encourage people to keep signing up for those, and book those meetings in with those elected representatives, and letting us know that you've booked a meeting, so we can keep track of who is and who isn't meeting their constituents.
that's amazing. And we have a lot of trans and non-binary people as viewers on this channel, because the Politics Social is a big ally to the trans and non-binary community, we hope. And I've had a lot of reach outs from some of the viewers of this channel who have actually fixed and gone and seen their MPs, which is just say, and as allies, and just saying, I care about trans people. I've got trans people in my life. What's your view on this? Because you need to be having a much more positive view than I'm seeing, and that is amazing that I'm beginning to see more allies are doing that. So it's having an effect, and it's a really good idea,
Yes.
right? We don't have to pay for lobbyists to sit in Parliament. We can just go and see our MPs and affect, 650 MPs very slowly over the next few years, which I think is amazing. Okay.
And of course, allies encouraged as well.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. And it's
Yeah.
the allies of this, a lot of the allies in the chat who have been doing that. I've had a few reach outs, which is just makes me feel good. Even if you've got an MP that you don't think is sympathetic, the fact is that the more trans people go and see them, the more they go, hang on a minute. Maybe I shouldn't be, listening to just one voice. There's a lot of other voices out there. I think it's a really good thing. So can you tell me a little bit, if you don't mind sharing with the audience? I mean, everybody knows my story and a lot of your story as a trans guy, a little bit about your history and whatever you're willing to share with us.
Yeah. So I, came out as trans 9 years ago. I was 31, 40 now. So yeah, I came out as trans when I was a primary school teacher. That added to the terrifying sort of nature, of things. So realistically, I knew I was a boy when I was like 3, 4. I
Yeah.
did. But one thing or another, sort of socially, culturally, I sort of repressed a lot. And people that repress a lot get really good at it. So it wasn't until I had a few sort of what I call penny drop light bulb type moments when I was 30, 31 that they've came to acknowledge what I felt about my body and about my gender. So yes, very terrifying because I was working in a school. The education unions have LGBTQ plus networks now. There's even in the National Education Union, there's even a trans and non-binary network with a lot of members. But at the time when I was coming out, there was the only person I could read about that was a trans primary teacher was Lucy Meadows, who was hounded by the press and ultimately took her own life. So yeah, very, very scary. Actually, I had a great coming out experience. The children, as anticipated, did not bat an eyelids, and were quickest to adapt. But the school were really supportive. The local community where I worked were really supportive, and so were the families. So I was very, very fortunate because not everyone has that experience. And indeed, if I was coming out today, I might not have had that experience because teachers tell me that things have got worse few years as an openly trans or non-binary educator. So yeah, it was at that point I commenced my social and medical transition. And where my life is now, I could never have anticipated, I don't think. Because relationship breakdowns happened is quite common. I've relocated twice since coming out. Once to London when I moved out of teaching to work in the LGBTQ plus charity sector as an education specialist, and sort of gradually as TransActual developed its scope and what have you, and accessed funding, I sort of increasingly spent more time working for TransActual and less time working for other organisations, to the point where now I mainly do TransActual.
Brilliant.
We've been fortunate enough to access funding. I'm at a point where I finished my medical transition, largely because I'm fortunate enough to have thrown money at the situation. Yeah. So, I sort of went private initially for hormones, then that got taken over by the NHS. Then when I had top surgery, so mastectomy to flatten my chest, that the wait for surgery was unbearable, and
Yeah.
I was struggling at work, and I was off work with mental health for about 6 months, um,
Mm.
because you, especially as a primary school teacher, you have to be emotionally present, and
Yeah.
I just wasn't. So I ended up going private for top surgery, and then I got on track with NHS care, until the provider of my I had um so lower surgery, genital surgery for trans men or trans masculine people, or other non-binary people that originally had a vulva and vagina.
Mm.
It's multi-stage and very complex. So I'd had the first of my operations, and that does leave you in an unconventional, sort of end up with a lot of genitals, is one way of putting it. Um, Temporarily, but unfortunately, whilst I was in this in between stage, NHS England removed the contract from the only provider of care, and after a couple of years of waiting for things to resolve, you know, I ended up. My dad gave me money for me to go abroad and get things finished off privately, and no longer being on an NHS waiting list. It's a huge weight off my shoulders.
Yeah.
Huge. I hadn't appreciated there wasn't just going to be the alleviation of dysphoria, but
Mm.
it was the weight of not being on a waiting list and
Yeah.
not having that uncertainty anymore was astounding. So I think I've possibly answered some of your later
No,
questions
that
as
was
well,
really
Mr.
good.
Rachel. But
No,
there we
no,
go.
I really appreciate you sharing. I mean, most people, it brings me nicely on to, I'm going to swap a couple of the questions round, because the focus, we'll talk about, the next question will be about what's going on in the UK to the trans community. But I really want to go back, since you're talking about the trans masculine, trans guy experience, what the focus in the UK is always on trans women, right? Because that's where a lot of the hate is directed in the media and loos and, women only lists and all that stuff, and prisons, and yet, half the trans community are trans guys. I mean, obviously the non-binary community in the middle, but half, there are as many trans women as there are as trans guys. But the focus. So can you tell the audience a little bit about what is it? What's specific to trans guys that's different to the trans women experience? They all know about the trans, because a lot of our audience are trans women, and I often talk about that, my experience. So could you tell something? What is it that people don't see? What would you want people to know? Because your trans guys aren't in the media in the same way.
Yeah, well, yeah. Although of course there's a trans Emmerdale character,
Yeah,
Matty,
that's true in
trans man,
drama,
but
but
yeah, in
everything that
drama.
affects us
But yeah,
ultimately
we
affects you, right? It's just going to be,
yeah, but we
yeah.
don't get um so where trans women are portrayed as a threat, um trans men are portrayed as victims, unable to know our own minds, victims of the patriarchy, which, well, yes, we do have experience of um, sexism and misogyny, the same way that trans women or any cis woman would, but it's very much sort of portrayed as misguided, and so recently, there was a post about me on social media.
Only one.
Um, well, one that
Yeah.
I saw, and um, it is from someone involved in a renowned group that campaigns against trans people's
Oh, I
rights.
think we can guess.
And
Yeah.
yeah, it was referred. Oh, I met Shay at this event. And during the conversation, he was visibly trembling, and and during that conversation where if I was trembling, it was because I was very anxious that I was going to miss out on my free vegetarian sausage roll, you know. And I was trying hard to be polite to someone that I knew had hostile views
Yeah.
towards me and people like me.
Yeah.
But I remember noticing at the time of that conversation, she referred to me as, "Oh yes, I know who you are. They roll you out for things like Newsnight." And the insinuation there is the women in TransActual's organisation shove me forward when it's convenient. And I'm sort of the one co-founder of the organisation that's still involved,
Yeah.
and run the organisation on a day to day. So being rolled out in this, yeah, oh, poor, confused, just being used, you know, actually it says a lot
Hmm.
for what these people think of people with two X chromosomes.
Yeah.
If indeed I have two X chromosomes, I've not been tested, I don't need to be. But there's sort of we see misogyny and sexism from a few different angles. So we see it in the sense of how we're portrayed in the press as vulnerable.
Yeah.
There's a lot of talk of young lesbians being convinced to transition,
Yeah.
and completely, what that's saying is that these trans boys, these trans men don't understand and don't know their own mind, and couldn't possibly. That's what that's saying. And it's the policing of bodies that are perceived to be women or
Yeah.
female. Uh, so there's that. But then we also you see the difference in how you're treated
Yeah.
pre-transition and post-transition. And I think this is the same for trans women to an extent as well. For example, one of my friends, so I mentioned I recently relocated. A friend of mine drove a big, I hired like a Luton um, truck. And my friend used to be a delivery driver, so she had a lot of experience driving them.
Hmm.
But at the hire centre, the member of staff insisted on going for a drive around the block with her just to make sure. And that would not have happened
Yeah.
prior to her transition,
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I see the difference in how it's easier to get heard in meetings,
Yeah.
how I'm treated differently in all sorts of circumstances. Um, Looked to as the one being expected to pay the bill, and things like that in restaurants, and it's like, oh well, my sisters are far richer than me,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
not that my sisters are rich or anything, but
Yeah.
I work in the charity sector, and it's things like that.
Hmm.
There's much less understanding in terms of sort of
Can I ask you a question?
experience. Oh, go on, go on.
Well, just that as a trans woman, I mean, most women that I know in my life accept me as Rachel, but obviously a lot of the anger coming at the community comes from women and some weird guys that support the women, which is misogynistic in its own way in some regard. But the guy, I mean, it's an observation of the trans guys in my life. The guys accept the trans guys, right? They seem to. Is that your experience, or is that wrong? I just feel, I when I go to stuff in London and the trans guys are there, they're knocking around with the guys, and there doesn't seem. Is that wrong, or is that just we're just in a very accepting group because I have accepting friends, and so that's why I see that the guys are accepting the trans
I
guys.
think
Your experience,
tr- trans folks will treat trans men with equal contempt,
right?
but there are differences in how we move through society.
Yeah.
For example, is it's the trans man after being on testosterone for a bit might find it sort of easier to to have an interaction without
Yes.
someone knowing that they're trans,
Yeah.
and the same can be true for trans women, and it shouldn't have to be
Yeah.
anyway, but it does have safety implications
Yeah.
in terms of being able to move through our lives more safely, having more choice about who finds out that we're trans or not.
Yeah.
You know, it could be, it is just sort of a matter of. So for me,
Yeah.
my barber wouldn't necessarily know I'm trans unless he'd seen me in the newspaper or something like that, and don't mention it because it's not conversation that's not necessarily relevant.
Yeah.
Um, I was earlier in my transition,
Yeah.
it might come up, or things like that. I think, and one thing that trans women and trans feminine don't experience is fear around before people before having had a hysterectomy, is the fear that for some reason periods will start happening again.
Yeah.
Um, like either because sometimes people's bodies pose a fight back. So as an adult, I was on puberty blockers alongside testosterone because my body was getting a bit keen. That it really wanted to to produce
Yeah.
estrogen and things,
Mm.
and it really wanted me to have a menstrual cycle. I really didn't want to have one, so I was on sort of additional help to quieten that down. But yeah, things like, oh gosh, the
Yeah.
fear that a period could appear even years after it's been
Yeah.
after you've had one,
Yeah.
and there's and as well there's a lot of misconceptions around fertility and around things like safe sex, depends what you're doing and who with, and all of that. Um, of course, there's where some trans women or some non-binary people might be uh, sort of grieve the fact that they can't be pregnant.
Yeah.
Um, some trans men also keen to be pregnant, but then there are inequalities around how you're treated when
Yeah.
you're pregnant.
Yeah.
I was talking to a masculine non-binary person the other day. We were at an event in London, and they said no one had given. They're quite heavily pregnant, and no one gave their seat up for them because of the assumption that they weren't pregnant.
Yeah.
So there's all sorts of things.
Hmm. That is interesting. So if I said to you, what would be the one thing, I mean, that you would want people to know about being a trans guy? Because as I say, trans people are very familiar with the trans female experience, I think. What would be the one thing you'd like people to know about being a trans guy?
I want people to know about, and it's not being spoken about enough actually, is the scandal relating to trans men's lower surgery.
Yeah.
So there's lots of things to know here.
Yeah.
So the first thing to know is there's two types of, sort of surgery that people would go for if they want sort of a penis, basically. Um, both of them are typically multi-stage, quite complex operations.
Yeah.
For years, the NHS only had one team. They let the contract with this team expire for complicated reasons that I won't go into,
Mm.
um, and didn't tell patients about it for 15 months. And because it coincided with the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, people didn't really start asking questions for a year.
Right.
But to not tell a patient group that there is no provider for their surgery for 15 months is outrageous.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that there was so little press coverage of it speaks volumes
Yeah.
as well. It tells a story that a lot of people in the media don't want to tell about
Yeah.
trans people's experiences. And there's people, the waiting list now. If someone got referred from their gender clinic today, say they've had a horrendous wait for the gender clinic. They've been through lots and lots of appointments. If they got referred for one of these masculinizing sort of lower surgeries today, they could expect maybe they'll get their first operation in 4 years if they're lucky. Because there's one team and there's a team that's training up at the moment, and who are getting very good feedback.
Yeah.
But it's entirely plausible that there's people. I've got a 21-year-old nephew. It's entirely plausible that there are trans men or trans masculine people whose transition is already underway and will take long. It took for my nephew to be born and then graduate from university.
Yeah. Wow.
Looking at it that way,
Mm.
yeah.
Wow.
Assuming they've had no complications.
Yeah.
Assuming they've had no complications, it'd take 20, 21 years. Yeah.
Unbelievable. Thank you for sharing that. So this leads me on to quite nicely. I mean, obviously, we've had a bit since 2016, we've had a bit of a bad run as a trans community in the UK. And hopefully, we'll talk a little bit about Labour in a moment. But so what just some of the things that have happened, the last, I obviously talk about it a lot on the channel, but from your point of view, what are the things that have happened? It seemed to go downhill from about 2016 onwards. What sort of thing? What do you think's really been going on in the UK, in your view?
There's been a very successful misinformation campaign.
Yeah.
And this misinformation campaign can be traced back to the anti-gender movement more broadly. So the anti-gender movement is sort of describes efforts to essentially enforce and bring back sort of gender stereotypes, policing of people's bodies in terms of restricting access to abortion, contraception, things like that, upholding a very much a man and married and have babies sort of view of the world, often linked to religion, but not always. And trans people are sort of the edge end of that. So when we see, there was a court case challenging stock children, young people's clinic, several years ago, known as the Bell v Tavistock case. The legal team involved in that, the same legal team that take on lots of anti-abortion cases, is not coincidental. And that legal team have also, taken on cases sort of challenge where parents have challenged their children's right to access transition-related care and things like that, including parents of adults. I know that this team were pursuing a case. It is you can't untangle the sort of attack on trans people from the attack on sort of abortion and bodily autonomy, and you see it very clearly in the States.
Yeah. I draw this distinction. I think we often talk about this on this channel. Trans kids, take the kids' care away, take the adults' care away, then it's same-sex marriage, then it's women's rights. And that seems to be the pecking order in America. And we've lost the kids have lost their care here generally. And now they're looking at reviewing adult care. And there's the violence against trans people has gone up. And it's going up against same-sex couples. And there are people on the right standing up in Parliament going, hey, I'm just asking questions, which is how it started with us in 2016. Hey, I'm just asking questions. So it is that whole cycle of, if you break the T away from LGB is weaker, then they go after the same-sex marriage, and then they are onto women's. You can see it, and trans people are shouting about it. And I say this, everybody as my audience know, I say this all the time. Trans people are shouting about it, and our allies are shouting about it. And we're saying to a lot of women, they're coming for you, and the battle is with us, but there is you're next. And that's the frustrating thing. The UN wrote
Yeah.
the UN wrote that great report a couple of years ago, that just said there's $6 billion have been spent in Europe creating the division. Organizations in Tufton Street have been set up to break the
Yeah.
T off LGB. I mean, we can see it, and
Hmm.
but we had the papers doing their thing. We've had the BBC going all a bit. We've had
Hmm.
Number 10 briefing this stuff out in the last administration,
Hmm.
and we had that
Hmm.
perfect triangulate of the media, the hate groups, and the government all communicating with each other, it seemed. Is that your
Yeah.
feeling?
Well, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. In the links to, former ministers going
Yeah.
over and having meetings with Ron DeSantis in
Yes.
Florida, but again, I gently challenge that it's sort of happening separately. There's lots of things going on at once. So
Mm.
it's, you saw some members of former government, whilst still government ministers, attending really quite far right conferences, and
Yeah.
the sort of organizations that will have been, quite pleased that there were riots
Yeah.
and people of color targeted
Yeah.
just a matter of months ago, and all of that is all linked. Is all linked. It's that it all fits together into this world view
Yeah.
that the anti-gender movement, which is so closely tied up with racism, Islamophobia, anti
Yeah.
sentiment, all of that is all closely tied up.
Yeah.
Um, it all fits together. And something that I've noticed as well is that, you mentioned increasing attacks on trans people and particularly trans women. And
Yes.
a lot of the articles I've been reading, the UK-based ones particularly, have been created by teenage boys,
Mm.
you know.
Yeah.
And I'm where I'm a former teacher. I'm in a lot of sort of education circles still, and teachers that really worried about sort of the influence of the misogynistic
The incel movement. Yeah.
incel movement. Yeah, along with the far right, the likes of Andrew Tate,
Mm.
and this is all
Yes.
influencing young men in particular. And what we need to be asking as a society is
Yeah.
what's happening for these young men?
Yeah.
Why is this happening? How do we stop it?
Yeah.
And this is what I mean is that this is the struggles are so closely linked that,
They are.
against misogyny and transphobia and all of the other isms and obias really.
Yes. I mean, it feels like, the organizations like under Project 2025 in America are also in London. Some of the other groups that are linked to that group are in London and in
Hmm.
Tufton Street, and they're all doing the sort of women's rights stuff. The incel movement was created to create division between men and women online to attack women as well. And you're seeing I mean, they're saying a lot of women are becoming more social, more inclusive as they get older. In several countries, you're seeing the line go up, and guys in a lot of countries are beginning to dip down, and the incel move. And the guys are not getting girlfriends, and the apps are, they're not getting that, and they're getting more and more angry, and there's more and more violence against women, and because of the frustration because of that. And you're seeing this whole division between men and women. They reckon the next election in America will be fought on gender, because of the division. And I think it's, this whole break the T from LGB, get men and women fighting, this whole cultural breakup. My feeling is a lot of that is social media, the algorithm. I always joke, it's sort of, if you don't like trans people, maybe you'll like Nazis algorithm. It's that,
Yeah.
it's what the algorithm does. I only see left wing content on all my YouTube, and that's great because that's what I like watching. But if and I never see any of the right wing stuff, the Nazi stuff, the racist, but it's there. I know it's there. I just don't see it, and that's what the algorithm does. There's no gray. There's no middle ground on politics so you're seeing the conservatives and the labor getting more angry and further
Mhm.
apart, and you saw it with the Republicans and Democrats. They're further apart. There's no collegiate middle ground on anything. And I think social, and I'm hoping that what will save us and the world is a way that, like Brazil banning X, is that we do something like that with our social media, that we start not restricting it, but actually getting rid of the platforms that do not police false speech and hate speech. And I think I think governments are beginning to wake up to it, but a little late. And trans people have
Mm.
been the butt of that, and Black and Asian people, etc., people of color, have been at the butt of that at the moment. But women are now getting it from the incel movement. So the social media feels like a big, kind of contributor to what's we're facing.
I think, you know, during lockdown, during the COVID,
Yes.
young people were on social media a lot more.
Yeah. Two
And
more.
I do think that someone clever than me has probably done some research on it.
Yeah. Oh,
But
without a doubt.
there's again, my teacher friends have reported boys coming out of lockdown and back into
Yeah.
school
Yeah.
young. There was more. They were hearing more about Andrew Tate
Yeah.
and things like that
Yeah.
because listen, what else were they going to do?
Yeah. We were all on social media too much during lockdown, I think. And I think I made us a little bit more paranoid, a little bit more too much media. I think everybody absorbed and came out very different. A lot of people came out very different after that period. So let me bring up. We've got about 15 minutes left, and I've got some quick fiery questions for you to go through. I mean, it's a politics channel, so I want to ask you a little bit about that. How do you keep your how do you manage your mental health? What do you do to keep it? I mean, my mental health is busted. I mean, people are no secret that I've not been doing presentations in training for a while. I did my first one yesterday, and I haven't done any for ages. So it was that's why I had a bottle of champagne last night, because I've not been in front of an audience for quite a long time. There's some pretty nasty stuff out there about me, and it really hurt. So I didn't do anything for a while. Um, how do you manage your mental health?
The quick answer is with difficulty.
Yeah,
The, the holding on to hope
yeah,
and taking joy in small things.
yeah. Good. That's that's as good as any. I mean, I'm lucky. I'm married to the most optimistic person on the planet, which helps.
That
It can
does
be
help.
really
Yeah.
annoying when you want to be, when it says misery keeps good company, but when your wife is perpetually happy, it's a challenge. Um, who are your heroes and villains, political or non-political? I mean, obviously,
Oh, so heroes. Do you know what my grandma? She was so politically engaged. I think it's where I get it from.
yeah, good,
Um,
love it.
She was, even into her 90s, she was writing letters to politicians on stuff. So she's a definite
Yeah,
hero. Sort of born but quite difficult family circumstances and sort of lived in poverty and continued to fight all her life for justice and what was right. Villains, the sorts of people that waste their time on social media,
yeah,
going out of their way to be hateful.
yeah. I agree with that. I mean, I'm not on social media. And suddenly I got my life back, and that did help with my. I mean, there's lots of
Yeah,
if you're being out in the public domain like I have for 2016 since 2016. Before that, after I transitioned in the end of the 90s, as you know, but I didn't become a campaigner till 2016 when I stuck my head up, because being trans never was a problem for anybody up to 2016 for me. And it suddenly everybody was starting to um, and the Twitter and the Facebook abuse, and then general all those fun right-wing hard sites, right? Nasty articles about you. Mumsnet's got lots of nasty stuff about me on there, and that stuff you see, and allies send it to you, which is really annoying. Look at this link about
yeah,
you. Don't send me that article.
yeah. Someone
So
sent me a meme about myself.
yeah,
It's like, oh, thanks for telling me.
thanks for sending that to me. So I don't look at any of that. So they can't,
Good.
I'm not on Facebook. I'm not on Twitter. I'm not in anything. So I don't see that anymore. and that's been helpful. I don't Google my name. I don't look at Google. I don't see it. I don't ask about it, and that does help. You're always worried when I'm on Google, and I always saying, as I was saying to Graham, I very carefully not to put my name in or anything to do with me because it just might come up in the really quick.
Yeah.
So, and that helped a lot. And I read, and I spend a lot of time reading and watching very positive, like this channel's very positive, and I mean, some of the subject matter might not be, but the way we present it is positive.
Mm.
And I find that helpful, but it is, I just wonder, I hope the internet will just sort of heal itself at some point. And when we win this, we get through this. So what do you think Labour should be doing? They're in power. They haven't had a good start. I mean, Wes Streeting was, oh, I'm just going to accept Cass, not going to do anything else. Blah. What else? What do you think Labour should be doing? What would we like to see coming out of Labour over the next 5 years?
As well, I'd like to see drop the puberty blocker ban,
Yeah,
of course.
of course.
And I would like to see where there's reinstate meaningful access to transition related care
Yeah,
and listen to trans people. With healthcare more broadly, ensure all healthcare professionals have had at least basic trans awareness training.
God, what would that be like?
I'd appreciate that.
Yeah,
Um, and I think I mean, it's across the board, so it's I'd like to see a press regulator that actually does something,
yeah,
and not one that they sort of opt into,
yeah,
and that is quite frankly a chocolate teapot.
yes. It's
So I'd like meaningful press regulation, something done to challenge online misinformation with caveats around that though,
yeah, of
because
course.
there's
Yeah.
well, what else could they do for us?
Conversion therapy, obviously, without any
Yeah,
restriction on
banning,
trans.
banning conversion
Yeah,
therapy. Um, so much, things like making sure that we have the Equality Act, but making sure it actually makes a meaningful difference in people's lives.
yeah,
Because too many people experience discrimination still. Things like that. And then somewhere on the list, yes, reform of the Gender Recognition Act
yeah,
and legal recognition that works for non-binary people and under 18s. But
yeah,
that is quite far down people's priorities.
yeah,
But there's so much, thinking about um, um, trans migrants as well, and sort of experiences around migration. It's sort of there's a lot. I've got a very long shopping list, Rachel.
no, it's fair. I mean, these things that all should
Yeah.
be. I mean, yeah, I think. I mean, the conversion therapy is really important without any conditions for trans people, or for, special, which other people have managed to do it. I think the obviously better care, much more resourced gender identity clinics, training for GPs. I like because I have a great GP, but they don't have any training on
Mm.
trans care, as you know. Well, not very much. Um, so that would be really, really good. I think hate crime should be toughened up. So if you assault a trans person and it's trans motivated, it should be a lot stronger, the penalty. And I think I mean, they tried to doing that in Ireland at the moment, and there's been a little bit of rollback on some of that as it's going forward where I'm from. But I think we should be toughening up hate crime laws against LGBTQI. So I just want to see more from them, rather than the rhetoric and an LGBT action plan properly written.
Yeah, reinstate an LGBT action plan, please. Yes, that'd be good. And do you know what? With hate crime, I think is actually missed out a really big one and an obvious one for me as well. Education,
Yeah. Oh God, yeah.
and it's challenge LGBTQ plus inclusive education will bring about
Yeah.
change that we need in society,
Yeah.
and reduce the need for tough hate crime laws or
Yeah.
things like that.
Yeah.
And it's about
And also the
addressing the cause, not the symptom. Yeah.
yeah, and also an all gender loos in all new builds, all public buildings and things. I think
Yeah.
I don't know what happened because Kemi changed the rules, didn't she? And then I'm just wondering if is that going to be changed? We really need to undo what she
Great
did.
question. Great question.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I mean, what the problem, having gender neutral men's and women's
Yeah.
provision. What's wrong with, it's perfectly sensible.
Yeah. I need to do
Then
some.
people have got choice,
Certainly at the first step, just roll back what she did about getting, there's got to be gendered loos and, all gender loos, which got rid of that out of the planning regs. There needs to be some sort of reversal of that first step. And then actually, when you build a new building, actually have an all gender loo or a fleet of gender neutral loos in a corridor that just has loo on the door with a sink in there, super loos, which most corporates have now.
Yeah.
So,
And actually, that sort of setup could be argued as being better for all women
yeah.
because I was at Euston Station. This is one of the things about being a trans man that people don't talk about: the queue for the toilets.
Yeah.
The guilt I feel when I breeze for half a second when I breeze past. So the other day at Euston,
Yeah.
breezed past a huge queue out past.
Oh,
Like past, they're almost at the donut shop,
yeah.
like or whatever it is,
Tonight.
um,
Yeah.
all that way, the big queue for the women's toilets, and then man's toilets saunter out.
Why if they made them all gender neutral and just super loos with a sink and a loo, then everybody would be queuing equally and people would go
Exactly,
down
there'd
quicker.
be toilet queue equality, which
Yeah.
is something that isn't spoken about enough, I don't think.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's one of the
That
major
it,
things as well.
that's
Traveling
interesting.
in toilets is a lot easier.
Yeah, well, there's a big plus for you. It sucks to be me.
Yes, sorry.
It's okay. So you have been given a magic wand, not from the Harry Potter world, of course, from a normal, friendly magician world. You can change one thing in the world. What would it be? What would you change with your one wish?
Really small one. Get rid of inequality,
Okay,
any inequality.
nice. And that would fix an awful lot of other things then. So
Exactly. Is it because it's what it's at the root?
perfect. So before we come on to the pudding, how do people find you if they wanted to follow you on? Are you on any social media?
You can follow TransActual.
Okay.
Yeah, so we occasionally still post on Twitter.
Ugh.
Or, we shall continue calling it that
Right.
because of how little respect Elon Musk pays to his
Yeah.
trans daughter. But we're
Who
on
rocks?
Twitter. We're TransActual CIC.
Yeah.
On Facebook, Instagram, and Threads, we're TransActual UK.
Brilliant.
You can follow me, Chay Brown, on LinkedIn. I'm still learning how to use it, really.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Like
TransActual on
everybody else on
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn. What is
Yeah.
LinkedIn? What does it do? Yeah.
Yeah, and we're also on Mastodon and
Right.
Blue Sky.
Fantastic.
So yes, we do a lot of social medias. Um, if
As you
people want
should.
to, yeah, look on our website. It's transactual.org.uk, and all of that information is hopefully on there somewhere.
Perfect. So pudding, as they say in the trawl, give our viewers one positive thing for the future. What we like to end on a high. What's the faith and hope?
The strength in the brilliance that is the trans community.
Love it.
Part of what keeps me going. I'm not saying that cis people aren't incredible too. I know some incredible, amazing cis people. But for the purposes of this conversation,
Yeah.
seeing how trans people, for the most part, are really there for each other and lifting each other and building each other up. And flipping out the contributions trans people have made to the world. We wouldn't have
Yeah.
mobile phones if it wasn't for trans people.
Yeah.
You know,
Mm.
so that's pudding, and I've got to say the pudding is always my favourite part of any occasion.
Yeah. We rock. That's it. And we can fly, but we don't tell people that. Shh. Yeah.
How people.
Chay Brown, it's been wonderful chatting to you. So thank you so much for coming on to Politics Social. It's been a real pleasure chatting to you. Perfect. And thank you very much, everybody, for watching. Thank you for everybody, all the socialites in the chat. Sorry we started so late this evening. We'll be back next week with another guest. And I look forward to chatting with you all then. Have a lovely evening, everybody. Bye for now.